In my youth, I read the majority of the works of John Buchan, an author of adventure books which attracted many youngsters of my age. He wrote 100 books, in all of which 28 were adventure stories, and it was at the English American Library of Nice, in the biography section, that I found Memory Holds a Door. And of course it rekindled in me the recollection of my early readings, and I therefore was very keen to read much more about John Buchan than I'd known before. Having read his adventure novels in my youth, when I arrived in Scotland first, I realised that I had already seen some of the things which he describes. In the 39 Steps, for example, there's the wonderful journey by train from London to Edinburgh, where part of the adventure takes place. Of course, steam trains in those days, which is, of course, what I remember also. And crossing the Forth Bridge. All these features of Scotland I'd learned, and many of the mountains, through having read Buchan's book. So there is a personal connection, which is really very strong. Buchan had an interesting life. He was born in Scotland in 1875. He was the son of a minister of the United Free Church of Scotland, who had a parish on the Fife Coast. He got a university scholarship to Glasgow and then another scholarship to Oxford. And at leaving Oxford, he started to study for the law, and following that was called upon by the High Commissioner of South Africa to become his assistant. He developed a knowledge of South Africa, which he describes very clearly in his books, and returning into the UK after 3 years in South Africa, became a partner in the publishing firm of Thomas Nelson, who at that time was one of the largest publishers of English books in the world. And here in this library we have many of Thomas Nelson's volumes. At the start of the First World War, Buchan was quite seriously ill. He was 39 years of age and couldn't become part of the forces. He continued to write, and in fact at the end of the war he published 24 volumes of the history of the First World War. And after the war he became a Member of Parliament. King George V in 1935 raised him to the peerage as Lord Tweedsmuir, and he was appointed Governor-General of Canada, where he died in 1940, and received a state funeral, as he had worked very hard to integrate the different ethnic groups in Canada throughout his life. Following his death, he was awarded a state funeral in Canada. That was in 1940. And during his life, he had been given many honorary degrees by universities and other institutions. Streets and parks and places had been named after him. But Memory Holds the Door, which is the book I'm presenting, is very much more than an autobiography, because in this book, Buchan also has little biographies of many of his friends, and his friends held high position in Britain of that time. And in fact, he uses many of the people he knew in real life as characters in his novels. Richard Hannay, for example, who is perhaps best known character, who appears in his best known novel, The 39 Steps, is based on a British Army officer who he knew while in South Africa. I feel that Buchan, like so many of his contemporaries, were famous men who had created the world that we now know. The Victorians had created the public library, and many other institutions that we profit from today. I think that reading Memory Hold the Door will give a witness to those who created the world that we live in and have benefited since, and perhaps those who read Memory Hold the Door will themselves do great things for future generations. The stories and adventures of John Buchan transported me into many different countries, into mountains and hills and islands and all sorts of wonderful places. And these images created by the author really was so alive and full that I was forever looking for his books. And although the catalogue of books at the public library showed probably the entire number of Buchan's adventure stories, they were always out, and you went back, and if you were lucky, somebody was just bringing back another. They were very, very popular at that period.